Welcome to yet another episode of Hollywood Kitchen. And I am very excited about this. My friend Mary Stanford and I are huge John Gilbert fangirls. We are so psyched, and we've been wanting to do this episode for a while. So today, making his Hollywood Kitchen debut is Charles Cisneros. Charles is a collector on silent film star John Gilbert, an expert. He had a big portion of the recent exhibition called Meet the Stars at the Hollywood Heritage Museum, which was a huge hit. And he also is a set dresser who works on movies and television. So making his debut, Charles Cisneros, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for
So we are going to talk about the life, the legend, the myth busting, and the food of John Gilbert. So Charles, for someone watching this that may not know about him, tell us briefly the 101 on John Gilbert, who he was, what he did, and why we should watch his films today.
Okay, well, John Gilbert was a silent film actor back in the early 20s. He had a raw background in film at Fox, and prior to that, he came from a family of theater. And he started out in Innsville, as we all know that place, and did a lot of films. And when he started out at MGM, he became a serious rival to Rudolph Valentino. He was handsome, he was dashing, people loved him. And I think he was part of the true pioneer era during the times of, you know, Charlie Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks. I mean, these were people who were his friends. But nowadays he's been completely forgotten. A lot of people don't know, who he is until you hear about, oh, wait a minute, isn't he the guy that couldn't make the transition to sound? Did he have a piping voice, a squeaky voice? I mean, that's one of the number one questions I got. But now you're starting to see a lot of him on Turner Classic Movies. You're seeing him on DVD, and that's thankfully in part by Leatrice Gilbert Fountain. She was the ambassador, the one who really brought her father back to life, because she felt like he was a footnote when she would read about him. So she wanted to set the record straight, pretty much.
Yes, and I was lucky enough, I got to meet her in San Francisco at the Silent Film Festival and have her sign the book she wrote called Dark Star about John Gilbert. And she wore this white pantsuit with these diamond earrings and an updo in her hair. And when I took one look at her, I'm like, my God, that is the product of two silent film stars. Like she just radiated her own level of star power. And I'm so grateful I got the opportunity. And by the way, for anyone watching that has not seen a John Gilbert film, or even if you have, August 19th, Turner Classic Movies is devoting 24 hours to John Gilbert for their silent Summer Under the Stars programming. So if you haven't seen his films and you do have TCM, you will get basically a buffet of his films. And I highly
Yeah. So Carrie, I think when you said that we were fangirls, I think what you're neglecting to tell people is actually our mutual love of John Gilbert was part of what solidified our friendship
yeah, it
all
is.
of those years ago. Because we were introduced by a work colleague of both of ours who we met. I think it was a Hollywood assistant networking event, right? Nothing to do with classic movies. And she said, Carrie, you love old movies. Mary, you love old movies. Discuss. And then she went away. And we never stopped discussing. We're still discussing. But I think that wasn't one of our first friend dates, I think, was to go see a John Gilbert movie because I'd never heard of John Gilbert. And you said, oh, you're gonna love him.
It
And
was. Okay.
yeah.
Rest in peace to the great Bean Theater, which was torn down on the LACMA property in LA County Museum of Art. LACMA showed The Merry Widow on the huge screen at the Bean Theater. I took Mary and her eyes got this big and she was like, I am in love. I was like, yes.
It just leaps off of the screen at you. So if people haven't seen a John Gilbert film, I do want to just add a little bit, because he was more than pretty. He wasn't just pretty. There were many beautiful men in silent films. John Gilbert had charisma. He had charm, and he was a very good actor too. along with being absolutely gorgeous to look at.
So the Mary Widow was your first, Gilbert, on the big screen. And then I took you to UCLA back when they were on the campus, the UCLA Film Archive, and we saw Flesh and the Devil on the big screen.
Yeah. And I gasped at certain scenes that were just so like not, you know, if you think of silent films as being that kind of precious thing, like there's some very, dare we say, erotic and scandalous things in Flesh and the Devil. And I don't even want to explain because I don't want people who are going to watch it for the first time to be spoiled. I want them to have the moment of, oh my God, did they just, oh, you know.
Yeah, beware of the piercing eyes. He had that magnetism, and you see it in the intensity in his eyes. And the first time he takes a look at Garbo, he takes this deep breath, and he's just lured to her. And from that point on, became their affair.
Right.
And,
That's actually whose place I'm taking in this photo is Greta Garbo's, just so people know.
That's
I
awesome.
like it.
Like, I mean, yes, he was a great actor, but you can tell they are insane in love and attracted to each other in that film. It's like iron to a magnet or something. It's so profound. And you know what it occurred to me? That film's going to turn like 100, I think, next year or the year after. So
1926.
okay, so it's like a 98-year-old
2000,
film.
yeah.
And it has not dimmed the eroticism. You still watch that film and you're still like, wow. Yeah.
But coming back to how he was such a good actor because he could do films like that, could be completely believable. And Carrie knows that some of the silent film acting just sends me rolling in the aisles with laughter because it's just so over the top. A lot of the dramatic things. John Gilbert never did, not once. Like he could be completely over the top, but still somehow believable in the emotion of it. But he could do a role like that, but then he could turn around and he could do The Big Parade, right. where he's this all-American guy, and there's the emotional arc of going through the war and falling in love with the sweet, simple French peasant girl. And yeah, and it's lovely. And you just adore him. And it's a different kind of falling in love on screen.
And the big parade, I was so fortunate. I've gotten to see a lot of John Gilbert films on a big screen. In 2005, when it was like, I think the 80th anniversary of Big Parade, Randy Haberkamp at the Academy did a big screening with an orchestra and the whole bit. And I got to see it and I could not stop crying. Like tears were pouring down my face. And I was so touched by the story and by his performance. I mean, they didn't even have the Oscars in 1925 yet, but I'm pretty sure that would have sweeped it if they did. Because if you watch the scene where he's at war and he receives the letter from the ex-girlfriend and he's reading it in front of Renee Adoree, that is a master class in film acting right there. And it's what he does with his eyes, what he does with his face. It's not a handsome, pretty boy necessarily. It's not the romantic. It's not that. But to me, that movie is so powerful. And that to me, I think that's his masterpiece.
I think it's pantomime at its best. I'd have to line it up with La Boheme as well, when Lillian Gish is basically trying to reenact his scene to try to convince Roy D'Arcy about his play, you know, and not getting away from The Big Parade. But I feel like those two films really personified what really was pure pantomime at its best. But getting back to The Big Parade, my favorite scene was when Renee's chasing him and he's throwing his shoe at her, he's throwing his necklace, and then at the end, it's like she's there and the camera pans in on her and we fade out. Oh, I just got chills right there. It was just like, I'm getting it right now, but you know, it was just one of those films that was never designed to be a big hit. But after watching it through the dailies, it was like Thalberg was like, we need to add this, we need to add this. And, you know, Roman's Chinese baby, you know.
They knew they had a hit.
They had something special.
And to me, honestly, this is in my top 5 favorite of all time, even up till today. I mean, that's how much.
Me too. I mean, I think not just silent films. I think of all films. It's beautifully made, and it holds up so well. The message of it holds up. It's an anti-war film that manages to not be cynical. and you know that that's a very, very hard thing to do. um but you see the heart in every character. There's no bad guy really, you know, even the German soldiers that they find, like, there's, you can still see the humanity
Yeah,
in
that
them.
was a very powerful scene,
Yeah.
definitely. And they were, two connecting.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the biggest grossing films at MGM. I mean, it showed for 2 years. It grossed up to $15 million. It pretty much put MGM on the map, and it was one of the highest grossing films till 1939. And we know which film that was,
Gone with the
but
Wind.
Gone with the Wind. But that's why I felt like MGM kind of owed it a little bit to John Gilbert. He really put them on the map, and he was a huge star by this time, 1925. The Big Parade, yeah, would have ran away with Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Director. He
Supporting.
did win the Photoplay Medal Award. I'd like to get that photo where he's, or where that thing is, you know. But yeah, he would have ran away with all these awards, and but that pretty much put him on the map, and he was on cloud nine after that film, and so I could see why he went off and did Bartley's The Magnificent after that. Just a fun swashbuckling film.
Also on DVD from Flicker Alley.
And also a lot of fun. Like, he's just having a ball in that whole thing. Like,
yeah, he glitters. He really he you could just see it. That was a, anybody ever want to talk about Bartley's? It's one of my favorite films, and you could tell it was just like, one of his best swashbuckling action film when he's climbing up the, I mean, the stunts that he did, and it was kind of a montage to Douglas Fairbanks, and it was during the same time when Fairbanks did The Black Pirate. So
Yeah.
he must have been like, wow, great job, mate. That was an excellent. And he just glitters. He has that sparkle in his eye. He's happy, and I feel he's at his pinnacle. And you see that in Bartley's The Magnificent, definitely.
and it was a lost film
Yeah. Oh yeah.
that I remember when it was found, because there was that, it was, they showed a clip of it in Show People, the
Mhm.
Marion Davies film, and that was all we had. And it was a wonderful clip, but that was all we had. And then it turned up, and I can't remember where it turned up. Carrie, do you remember?
Where it turned out, but I remember when it premiered. I was in San Francisco at the San Francisco Silent, which I've been going to now for like 22 years. Oh my God, you were there too?
So I was there. Apparently they found it in Europe, and they restored it. And I brought Leatrice's daughter, Lauren Hart, and I took her to the Castro Theater and saw it in a live audience. And the light came booming down on her. This is, Lauren Hart, the granddaughter. So I felt honored to bring her. We flew out there and to watch it with a live orchestra, and to watch a film that has been completely lost for so many years, to finally see it again, and like, wow, and there's many lost films too that are.
Upset with someone because I was at the pizza place right across the street from the Castro Theater in between films, right after Bartley's. And this guy was complaining, I can't believe they only showed digital. We didn't get to see it on 35. And I turned around and got really mad because I go, look, mister, we ought to be damn glad this thing was found after being considered a lost film for 80 years. I will take this film in any format I can get it. And we should all be so lucky. So I got kind of mad because I'm like, how dare you complain? I mean, my God, we have this movie.
Yeah, not only that, they found an older film prior to MGM, The Count of Monte Cristo.
Also on this DVD, sir.
Yeah, and I love his character, how he just knows. I think, I don't know if they had it in those days, but I felt John Gilbert was a method actor, because method actors normally take their characters home with them. And Jack did that. If he played a Russian Cossack, he would have Russian parties with caviar and Russian balalaika musicians at his house. If he was a sailor, he'd buy a skit, he bought himself a boat and named it the Tempress. So he literally would bring his characters home, not like my technique actors, where you could just, you're in and you're out. Jack lived his parts, and he would take them home with him. So I felt, definitely, me personally, I feel he was ahead of his time.
He was method before method was a thing.
Exactly. That's what.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's what I meant to say, is that, to me, if they had it, labeled what it was, Jack was definitely a method actor. He studied plays, he studied theater, he immersed himself with books. He was self-taught, and being brought up by his mother in theater, he was playing those parts in his head while she was performing.
Mhm.
So,
And I think that's a perfect transition, Carrie, to talk about the recipe.
Yes. Now, Mary and I, we had a lot of debate about what to make. There is a John Gilbert clam chowder. There's John Gilbert sturgeon Norway, but it's burning hot summer in Los Angeles. So we figured an appetizer or something that doesn't require the oven was really called for.
Right.
So,
And neither of those have anything to do with any of his movies. So this is the recipe that Carrie found that we thought had the most to do with his films.
yes.
So Carrie, go ahead. Read it off.
This is the book this came from. This was gifted to me for my birthday by Janet Klein, my friend in the famous musical chanteuse. This is called Food and Fashions in Beverly Hills. This book was published in 1930. And I shall read the recipe to you. It's caviar a la Reine. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. John Gilbert, Metro Goldwyn Mayer star, favors and knows how to prepare this delicious tidbit called caviar a la Reine. Cut 6 rounds of soft toast and spread with 4 tablespoons of caviar mixed with the strained juice of 1 lemon. Finally, chop 1 tablespoonful of onion and place a tiny mound at the center of it on each round of soft toast. Chop 2 fine hard-boiled eggs and sprinkle over all. Place a round of toast on a small lettuce-covered plate and serve.
wow.
So
that is a crime against caviar. So we've made some adjustments to it.
tell the audience about the adjustments, because you and I have done a lot of hand wringing about this caviar. Working girls were not made of money. So trying to find caviar that's not a gazillion dollars was kind of a challenge. Do you want to talk about what you found here?
We tried this several years ago, right, with roe. We tried the inexpensive caviar that you could buy. It was like $10-15 called roe, which is basically fish bait. We just couldn't do it. It was horrible. And so we just put this recipe away. We're like, we gotta find something else, but we never did. And so we tried this again. This time I think we've cracked it, but I'm also here and I'm set up with several different things. We're going to try live on air to find out how this goes. So first thing is the caviar that we are trying this time. I actually think it's pretty close, not exactly close, but pretty close to the real stuff. And it is seaweed pearls. And you can get this at Cost Plus. Yeah, thanks. Black seaweed pearls. So if you're vegan, do check, because I'm not a vegan, so there may be something in it that I'm not aware is an issue. But as far as I know, it's vegan. And I think it's got a nice caviar taste, and it's got a nice caviar texture.
And it says plant-based seaweed sustainable or sustainable.
Right. And I also think it's kind of fun because, John Gilbert played aristocrats. He himself was very much not, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So what I've proposed for doing this is, rather than following the recipe, don't put any lemon in it. That will just ruin the flavor. So we've got crackers, you've got your own things. And by the way, because, we are talking about caviar, we also have our champagnes with us. And I know, Carrie, you don't drink alcohol. So I left you with, when I had to leave town, I left you there with a St. Regis alcohol removed champagne. And I have one here that is a different brand that I've never tried. I'm going to try this live on the air. I don't know if I can get this in there. It's called Free. Whoop, there we go. Free. I've blocked myself out. This I got at Target. Yours came from Total Wine. So cheers, everybody.
Let's try efforts here. I think you're trying to be funny.
Oh, mine's not bad. It's a little sweet. It's a little too sweet. So what I think we should do, I know you've got eggs, you've got onions, and you've got our seaweed pearl caviar, and you've got those crackers. So you chopped your eggs, right?
I did, yes.
Okay. I sliced mine because I really wasn't sure when I started looking at it how on earth I would keep chopped eggs on a cracker. So I'm gonna start by taking one of my, well, actually, I'm gonna do one of my egg slices here.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna put a small amount of this caviar in the middle. And then I am going to take some of the onion. I have scallion here. That's just what I had, but it also I think would sound a little bit better. And if that doesn't work, I have some chives, which might be fine too. And we are gonna, moment of truth, find out how this works because I'm still a little skeptical of the onion being added and the egg, frankly. Okay.
Should I start this on my end as well then here?
Yeah, go ahead. And we're all gonna taste it together and find out, like, if I'm suffering, you're suffering, like. But I will say to anybody watching, this caviar seaweed pearls, I actually do like them. So it's this recipe is a little suspect.
See, I've never had a taste for seafood at all. My family probably thinks I'm nuts because they live near the ocean, and I'm like I'll have a burger because seafood is not my thing. But in the spirit of giving it the old college try, I shall try.
Yes. And oh, by the way, it's like $5 for that. Like it's so inexpensive. It's great.
I'm not wasting like extraordinarily expensive caviar.
No.
So, all right, so I put it on the crackers or on the rounds here.
Right.
All right. And now the idea is we add the onion and the egg.
Add the onion and the egg in whatever way you can that it won't fall off. And I would be just a sprinkling of the onion. Don't want a lot.
With my hands or no? I mean, they're clean. They're clean, I swear.
I feel very much like this recipe is like we're like this is like one of those like YouTube things where people dare each other to do dumb things. I feel like we've become that.
We did Norma Shear's pineapple sweet salad, which was like Gilbert's co-star in several films, which was like pineapple and onions and mayonnaise, and it was horrific. And Darren and I are both like, no, we are not doing this. And Eric ate tons of it, and we just stood there gawking at him. So it was crazy. Okay, so
wait, maybe don't ruin all of it. Like just stop there. Just do like a couple for and then because if it's terrible,
Sure, it's gonna be good.
All right, should I take a tiny bit of the egg?
But yeah, I mean, I did a big thing that's about as thin as I could slice it, but
you're right about the whole staying on the cracker issue.
Yeah,
I think the eggs.
Okay.
I mean, I know that
there you go.
Caviar, the fish eggs and the chicken eggs are a thing that people put together, and that's okay. That is done. So, okay.
Right. Well, okay. Here is my effort. And by the way, this is all on 1930s Depression era glass.
Nice.
I love. Okay, I'm going to show you guys a close up of what this looks like.
Looks rather horrifying.
I'm not going to lie.
I can get mine on camera. This is what mine looks like.
Oh, I like it's like a.
Okay.
Okay, hang on. Let me adjust the camera.
All right. Here we go.
All right, Charles, would you like to select one of these for your own?
Yes, I'll do this here.
Okay.
Deep breath, right?
All right, we ready? Do we do toast to John Gilbert?
John Gilbert.
Toast to John Gilbert.
Yes.
Bottoms up.
Bottoms up. That tastes good. I ate the whole thing.
Not bad. I'm not sure about the onion. I don't think it ruins it. It's just sort of there. Maybe I'm gonna keep trying this without the egg, like I know, Carrie, you're not digging it. I can tell.
I have a palate for seafood stuff, but hey, if you want to eat some more absolutely be my guess.
I'm not really a seafood person, but this is actually pretty good, I must say. This is what he must have served uh what's her name in the Merry Widow,
Mae Murray.
May Murray, yeah. You know, they
Yeah.
had dinner scene or whatever, so this is what he.
Oh yeah. Well, again, this book's got to be pretty fancy. I mean, food and fashions in Beverly Hills, you know.
Right.
Fashions.
Okay, I'm now trying it with just the caviar, seaweed caviar, and
Okay.
I put chives on this. So we're gonna see if this is better. I think it might actually be better with just with the onion.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
the chives aren't terrible, but I think it's a better combination with the onion.
Okay. So basically, just
I don't mind it.
onion minus the chicken egg.
Minus the what?
The chicken egg, the hard boiled egg.
Yeah, yeah. I think or just enjoy the seaweed pearls on their own because they're pretty good on their own.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Now the question is, did Gilbert cook? I'm guessing that he didn't, considering the volume of films he made. He probably had like no time. So, do you know anything about Gilbert's culinary tastes?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I know that he lived in this lavishly beautiful house on Tower Road, and he had servants. He had a maid. They were, I believe, they were Filipino housemates. So I would assume that, you know, he had people that made food from. I can't imagine him in the kitchen, you know, with his apron on or whatever. But I'm sure, you know, during his heyday, he would go out and dine out a lot. But when he did eat at home, I'm sure that he had people make him food, bring it up to his room or in his study. But I believe, yeah, I mean, I could be wrong. He could have been there, you know, learning stuff that he maybe got from his mom or whatever, but or his, you know, but my guess is that
He had help.
he had help. He had a house full of people that were serving him.
We need that, Mary. We need a Downton Abbey staff. We're always talking about how we need a Downton Abbey staff.
For sure.
So, how did you first discover John Gilbert, and how did you first start to collect on John Gilbert? Tell us about that.
Well, I try to go as deep as how did it really start? And I think it started with Greta Garbo. When I was a young kid, I saw a photo of her on a wall one day, and it just stuck for a long time. And whenever I'd see a photo or a movie, I was just at awe of her. She was so stunningly beautiful. And in 2000, early 2000, mid 2000, they did that Turner Classic Movie documentary that Kevin Brownell produced. And it basically was about Garbo. But then all of a sudden, they introduced John Gilbert. And all of a sudden, it was like, okay, who's this guy, you know? And Leatrice was the one that introduces her father. You know, my father was, John Gilbert was a rising star, blah, blah, blah. And so I wanted to know about him. And I couldn't find anything written about him. So my first book on John Dark Star, I actually rented it at a public library in Hollywood. And I read the book. And as I started to read this book, it was like just this whole, I could visualize everything. And what really brought my attention was his childhood and his upbringing by his, you know, his mother. And it was sad because he was like an unwanted child. His mother was, you know, very, you know, tough with him. One minute she would hug him, next minute she would throw him in the closet or lock him up. But it was just a beautifully written book, documented by his daughter. And when I read it, it just spoke volumes to me. And I was kind of really impressed by who this guy was. It was like, it's really hard to really explain it, but I ended up calling her. I got a hold of her, and through her son, Gideon Fountain, who lives in Connecticut. And he led me to her, and we spoke on the phone. And I said, Leatrice, I love your story, this book about your father. It was very touching to me. And I would love to tell this story in whatever format in the future. But I'd love to learn more about him. She said, take it and run with it. And I was just like, oh, wow, okay, you know. And then the next thing she did was lead me to her daughter. So I have a daughter. She lives in Highland Park. She's a folk singer. And I met up with Lauren and we would do movie nights. I would bring these VHSs. I got all these VHS movies before he was even on DVD at, Cameo Kirby, Woman of Affairs, Flesh and the Devil, and that was given to me by the president of the John Gilbert Appreciation Society, by Cheryl Stinchcomb, who was in love with Gilbert as well because of Saint Elmo, a film he did in 1922. So long story short, I started doing all these movie nights until we just ran out of movies. And then of course the first place I took her was the silent film theater on Fairfax. And we watched 12 Miles Out.
I've seen that.
There
Yes.
with the piano.
Must have crossed so many times where we met in person.
Yeah.
I
So
was there too. Yeah.
yeah, so we went there. I took her, of course, to the Castro Theater. We went and saw the Merry Widow with the live orchestra at the Egyptian. We went to the one in we saw the live orchestra of the Big Parade with Kevin Brownlow, the Goldman Theater.
Oh yeah, the Golden. I was there. Yeah.
And so it was just as if like I just wanted to let her, your grandfather, didn't even know the magnitude. And she just was into it. She was into my passion. She was into my, how much I really adored her grandfather. And she was learning at the same time because when she was growing up, she was just busy being a folk singer, and she had 4 brothers and she's the oldest. And so she came out west, and so she was living her life and big Bob Dylan fan and doing what she does. But as I started to bring Gilbert into her life, this is like her grandfather, Leatrice Joy is her grandmother. I'm like, you're Hollywood royalty, it's in your blood. And so not only that, I got a chance to meet her children, and her children they're brilliant. David Pryor, her son, is an aspiring writer director. He's directed some small films and he's doing some bigger ones. And her other son is part of the Philharmonic. He's an actual musician, and they're all brilliant. All his offspring are just, he would be very proud of his grandchildren. So I went ahead and I got into this, and I've gone where no one's really gone before. I went to the other side of the family, which was Virginia Bruce's side, his 4th wife. And that's where I went to Portland, where no one ever knew who Susan Ann Gilbert was or where she was from. And
we should probably backtrack. Leatrice was what, his second marriage?
Leatrice was the second. His first marriage, she had no Hollywood connection. And so Leatrice is someone he fell in love with. They were doing a film together during the Ince era. And so by this time he was actually directing a film back east for Jules Brulator and for the Eastman House for his protege, Hope Hampton. And he was miserably unhappy because he was in love with Leatrice when she was back in the West Coast. And so he kind of ripped up his contract, went back west, and tried to get back into directing, but there was no offers. He was far too valuable in front of the camera. So I think it was when he did Heart of the Hills with Mary Pickford, that's what really, they loved him in that, and it led him to his contract at Fox. And so Leatrice, and he was still married, by the way, and they got married in Mexico. And it's in the book, right? And they come back and they were living in Laurel Canyon, and this is 1922. So they were like that young version where they were just, the Brad and what's her name?
Angelina Jolie.
Yeah, no, the first one.
Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah, Jennifer Aniston. I'm sorry, Brad Jennifer kind of, relationship. They fought. There was a lot of animosity. Leatrice was a very successful actress under, Cecil B. DeMille. She did Manslaughter, The 10 Commandments, but she took a pay cut just to do work for him, and he was very jealous of Cecil B. DeMille, and she'd show up to work crying and her eyes were puffy, and he gave her an ultimatum. It's like, you either end it with him or focus on your career, or it's over, and so Gilbert was very jealous, and so they fought over a lot of things, and they had a child in 1924, which was Leatrice Jr., and this was during his rise at MGM. And to be quite honest, Gilbert did not want to divorce Leatrice. He wanted to stay married to her, but she was the one that just couldn't handle it because of his dalliances and his infidelities. things like that. And they were young and they were both stars. And you can imagine the difficulty that they were going through. So that was his second wife. And of course, he fell in love with Greta Garbo. And according to Adela Rogers St. John, Gilbert was like the love of his life. And I think when you want something, then you can't have it or attain. You always want what you can't have. I think he was more, obsessed with her by her beauty. He was, she was being Nordic, and she wouldn't marry him. And that, of course, will lead up to what we'll talk about later. But and then when their relationship ended finally, it's like as if he married Ina Claire on the rebound. It was just like, it was.
And she was a Broadway actress mostly,
Yes.
right? Theater, and she did some films, but
Well, she was a Broadway star, and she was a marvelous conversationalist. She was an intellect, and she found, I think they were at Francis Marion party at when the guys are on the floor playing scrap and, playing cards or whatever. And she just was very attracted to him, and he was attracted to her. And so there was just that animosity amongst each other. And she was this wit woman, and they fell in love and they got married. And I've read some things where they were in Catalina or whatever. She wanted to go out and party. He just wanted to stay home at the hotel. And she didn't come home till like 4 a.m. and he just bolted off. But they ended up with stay together for period of time. But I think with her, she was with him during the time of his demise. They went on a honeymoon. They come back. His career was like, this is during the talkies now. And the fact that she was trying to help him with his career and maybe help him, work with his speech, he wasn't having that. And so being paranoid and all that. And there were other reasons, but their relationship would diminish within a couple of years.
okay. And then Virginia Bruce was the fourth wife, and he had a daughter with her.
Yeah, they met in 1932 during Sound, and his career was idling, and this was the year that were really blowing up Clark Gable now. And this is what caused a rift between him and Paul Byrne, because he, promised him, I'll get you red dust. And it, of course, didn't happen that way. And so now he's sitting around idling. And so, well, I've got the script, the story that you wrote, remember, downstairs, and he sold it to MGM for $1 so that they would option it eventually. And so he did this film, and he was actually great in the film. His voice was fine. It's Leatrice's favorite movie of him. She says, that's my favorite movie of my father, because his voice is perfect. He's great. And Virginia Bruce was this young up-and-coming actress, and she had just did a film with James Cagney called Winner Take All. And so they loaned her out. She was more like a freelance by this time, but he saw her and fell madly in love with her with those big blue eyes, and she was only 21 years old. In fact, their relationship is the premise of Star is Born, because Dorothy Parker wrote that, and she was good friends with Jack Gilbert. And she was this young girl on her way up, and Jack was on his way down. So I believe 100% that's where her idea came in. But she married her, and within a year and a half, they were divorced, 1934, but that, as you know, that is when Garbo came back and wanted him for Queen Christina. And so he was very difficult, and he roughed her up a few times or whatnot. And it ended in a divorce, but she loved John, and they had this beautiful baby. And she never really had a chance to know her father, Susan Ann Gilbert, because she was like 1, 2 years old. And so she always referred to her father as Mr. Gilbert, never called her my daddy or anything like that. So she grew up her whole life knowing that he really didn't care. He cared about his career and being an alcoholic. It didn't really, and drinking and, doing what he did didn't really help matters. So their relationship was short-lived. But keep in mind, Virginia Bruce would go on in 1935, 1936 to be one of the most busiest actresses in Hollywood. She was pinned up to be the next Carol, like the next Carol Lombard, Jean Harlow. But I think the fact that she was married to Louis B. Mayer, married to John Gilbert, didn't help matters, so Thalberg kind of controlled her career. and she just missed certain spots, even though she did The Great Ziegfeld, Born to Dance. I mean, one of the busiest actors by the mid-30s. And I fell kind of in love with her because she was just stunningly beautiful, shot with all the best photographers, but she just missed her mark. She just missed her calling. But to me, her career personified stardom. She was on her way up, but John Gilbert was one that kind of like played its role in not really getting her where she wanted to go to. But it was after that was it. He would go on and meet up with Marlene Dietrich, and she would try to help him out, get him a screen test at Paramount, get him off booze, get him out and about. She just wanted to help John Gilbert and revive his career. But by then it was too late. His health caught up with him. And she was also, keep in mind, very instrumental in establishing his relationship with Leatrice in 1935. And that's what it was so sad about that, because she finally discovered her father. And then he would pass away in January of 1936. So there was this long void for many, many years in her life. And as soon as her kids were grown up and in college, that's when she went on that task to really rediscover her father and do all this extensive research and try to set the record straight on trying to establish his credibility in film lore during the pioneer era and to the 30s. But he was definitely bigger than life that she found out, discovered about her father, watching his films. So yes, he would come to life when you describe it. There's something about him. He was an enigma, like Leatrice said, he was like Mercury.
Touch him and he vanished.
And then he vanished. That touched me. And it's really true. It's just like he just was here at such a short period of time, but he accomplished a lot. And it's sad that he never really got the opportunity to really show what he really was capable of doing. But the fact that he did all these films, hit after hit after hit, and then to finally be obliterated, to be destroyed by Louis B. Mayer. And I mean, it's everybody knows that story, So.
Well, I mean, we know it, but I don't know that everybody watching knows that story. So perhaps it's a good opportunity to talk about, what, because I think for all of his talent, John Gilbert was his own worst enemy too. That I think, his erraticness, his inability to keep his temper under control. And so, the coming back to his voice before we get into this story about Louis B. Mayer, he played, it's very much like if you go to think about like in Singing in the Rain, right? Like Gene Kelly's character in Singing in the Rain is totally based on John Gilbert with the, how about I just say what I've always said, I love you, I love you, I love you. Although often John Gilbert was not just saying I love you, I love you. Sometimes he was actually swearing up a blue streak because it was funny. But he that's not, he had that on screen, seems like an aristocrat, seems like he should be speaking like this, but that's not how he spoke. He was American, and he had your standard American way of speaking, and actually a somewhat gravelly voice. And it's not a bad voice. It's a perfectly great voice, but it didn't, in my opinion, match the characters that people associated with him. Yes. And he could have pivoted, I think, but MGM didn't want him to. At that point, it was, let's make a break. Let's not try and redo his career the way that they were doing with others, the way that they did with Garbo, the way that they did with Bashir. Like they just, no, we're just gonna cut our losses. So yes, Charles, do you want to talk about what happened with him and Louis B. Mayer?
Well,
yeah,
allegedly with him and Louis B. Mayer, because the story changes a bit depending on who tells it.
They had a few rows, but the first one was early in his career. This was 1926, and he was doing Flesh and the Devil, or they might have just finished Flesh and the Devil in 1926. And so they would hang out at King Vidor's house and Eleanor Boardman, and they were getting married. They were in love. And so they basically talked Garbo into coming up to the house and maybe doing a double wedding ceremony. And I felt like Garbo was maybe kind of pressured into it. And so she said, sure, why not? Okay,
She
fine.
could have not totally understood English because
Yeah,
she's still new
yeah.
to America at that time. So she could have been
Yeah.
like, I don't get what they're saying, but sure, that sounds great.
So
You know.
they had this big lavish wedding at Marion Davies' house in Beverly Hills. And everybody was there. If you see the photos, I even have a few photos in my collection where it's like you got even Samuel Goldwyn's there, and you got, Louis B. Mayer and Thalberg, everybody was there. And there's this great interview with Eleanor Boardman. And this is why I believe it happened. I interviewed Kevin Brownlow, had the honor to bring him there to the barn, and I set it all up, and we had this interview, and we talked about this whole incident. And I said, she said it in this interview that Gilbert was crying and Gilbert didn't show up and he was getting rather upset, and Mayer was catching on to this, and so he wanted to know what's going on. And this is the way I look how it sounded. And I'm sure Vidor said, well, he thinks he's going to marry Garbo. He's not going to marry Garbo. She's at the studio taking pictures right now or something. I'll speak to him. So now they're in the bathroom, and I can imagine Gilbert just in there and looking at himself in the mirror, washing his hands or whatever. And Mayer's taking a piss. And then he comes over to him and he goes, hey, you got a minute? Don't marry her. Just screw her. And so because of that snide remark, Gilbert was just like, what? And just hit him, according to Eleanor Boardman, and his Mayer's glasses flew off. He hit his head on the tile. And he hissed at him and said, you're finished. You're finished, you son of a bitch. You're finished if it cost me $1 million. And then Eleanor Boardman turned around and said that was really the beginning of the end of John Gilbert's career. And so when I mentioned that to Kevin Brownlow, he says, well, we were a bit surprised when she said that, because it was like I go, what, you think she made that up? He goes, well, it was just caught us off guard. And I think she maybe wanted to, I go, no, she didn't add that. I think that she was speaking of, she's in her late mid-70s and she's telling you the story. Why would she just make the story? It happened. And she goes, well, you might want to talk to Mark Vieira about that, because he's another guy who doesn't believe that this happened. And he has the stills and the numbers. And I go, don't worry, I'm going to interview him next. So I'll get it out of him. So that's what happened. But I feel the reason why Gilbert wasn't completely done is because he was far too valuable at MGM at the time. He had made all this money for them. He had, Garbo and him were making lots of money. This role between them two, and they would go at it again in 1928 when he wanted to do Man, Woman, and Sin, Women in the By Street, where he said, what do you mean to tell me that this woman is a whore? And he says, yeah. And he says, well, I can't have this. This is not, our studio is clean cut. We can't have this. He goes, well, what's the big difference? My mother was a whore, And so Mayer was so livid that he actually got him this time and punched him and threw him out of the office and said, get him out of here. So I just feel that's just the way they did things in those days. You get into, I've been on a set, where I've seen construction guys go at it, but this is modern day era. But in those days, you get into a fight, all right, let's get back to work. Let's do what we do. But Mayer, I've had a chance to study and analyze this guy, and I've kind of grew to like him a little bit, because he was definitely a full all-American guy. He believed in the American dream. He had to be tough, especially in this environment that he was part of. He outlived all his predecessors, Samuel Goldwyn and Coen brothers and all of them. He was at MGM till 1953 or whatever. He was a shrewd man, and he wasn't the only. Gilbert wasn't the only guy that he destroyed. He destroyed many, many other actors. But what stands out is Gilbert was the big one. And what a lot of other people have said, why wasn't Gilbert given a voice test? And people that knew John Gilbert, they knew how he spoke. He had a fine voice. He sounded like David Niven. He sounded like Ronald Colman. He kind of had like an English accent. It was, you're right. It was the dialogue. It was horrible. He begged for redemption to be shelved, which that was technically his first talking film. And then they rushed that. Those two films were horrible. I watched it with Lauren Hart at the UCLA library. His Glorious Night. Why isn't it not on DVD? But it's like, oh my God, I love you. I love you. What is it meant to do, darling? It's just like you want to gasp, but at the same time, you feel really bad. Like, and he was under this $1 million contract, so he didn't. I'm just going to go through it with a grain of salt, and I'm going to give it the best. And so he did adjust, and for a guy who was destroying talkies and to do nine talkies after being destroyed his first two films, I think he did quite well. I think it was his health that caught up to him. Had he had lived, he would have went on to become a fine director. Had he had the choice of that kind of control, he was going to go to England to do some work over there. He probably would have ended up doing westerns like Robert Taylor and all these other guys, but he would have been incredible. But he was meant to be who he was at that moment. I mean, for him, I can't imagine, he's like the James Deans and died young or whatever like that. But yeah, that I believe that the fight happened, and it wasn't just his feud with Louis B. Mayer. It had to do with politics because of Fox takeover. They tried to, take over MGM, and that faltered. And because of Louis B. Mayer's connection to Washington, that faltered. But he was stuck now with this $1 million contract with Ironclad. And so what can I do? So this is where it all kind of came back. It's, well, Sam will come in. And remember, he said, I'm going to destroy you if it costs me $1 million. Well, it did. It cost him $1 million. And whatever it took to get him out, it was out of his eye line or whatever. But Gilbert was an incredible actor who should be remembered for his dedication and his contribution to film lore. I mean, he was up there with Fairbanks, he was Charlie Chaplin, he was all these men in one, and they adored him. And he wanted out of his contract. United Artists wanted him. And we all know that. I have that paper where he wrote a thing in Hollywood Magazine and said, MGM will not release me from my contract to offer me work. And after that, then they finally released him. And, but it's an intriguing, incredible Hollywood story. And people are like, why now? Why John Gilbert? Well, because why not? Because Hollywood has continued to fail to give you the goods on John Gilbert. They try to emulate him in the movie The Artist, which was an okay film, technical spin, but it was a beautiful film.
I'm gonna stop you. I thought it was a wonderful film.
I love The Artist too. I know
it was a silent. I feel it, but they ruined it when they started talking. Then they spoke in French or whatever. I mean, it was a beautiful montage to silent era. It was great. When I saw the trailer when they released it at the Cannes Film Festival, I said, "This is going to win Academy Award," and it did. I knew it was. And then they emulate him in a few other things. I think it's called Hollywood series, and then there was Hollywood Babylon, and I was just
Gary's not a fan of Hollywood.
See that. I won't see it.
Brad Pitt.
Sorry.
I didn't watch it till the end until finally I knew it was its last week in the showing on the theater. Wanted to see it on the big screen. I went to Santa Monica. I saw it started at 10 p.m. I didn't get out of the theater till like 1 a.m. or something, but it was like, it just went on and on and on. And they never stuck to the story of the book. They wanted to do it their way. And Brad Pitt was totally miscast. And in the movie, he blows his brains away. He didn't have a heart attack like John Gilbert. So they're going to do it their way. What Gilbert deserves is a true bioepic, true honest story, moment to moment, from his childhood to his demise. And it's such a colorful story. There's laughter, there's happiness, there's sadness. And getting back to Gilbert in terms of, he kind of did himself in. Yeah, he was difficult. He was tempestuous. He was, a lot of it had to do with his upbringing. It was the injustice by his mother.
If I can add, unfortunately, in my own life, I've been close to someone that has bipolar disorder. They did not have diagnoses or medication, or you had booze, drugs, or nothing. I mean, there's no way to deal with something like that. And I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, obviously, but based on my readings about him and watching documentaries by Flicker Alley, the one by Kevin Brownlow,
Yeah.
it seemed like he was high as a kite if things were well, down in the dumps, and there wasn't a lot of in between. Like he sounds, again, based on my non-professional opinion, he sounds kind of like a textbook bipolar who was treating alcohol. He was basically self-medicating with alcohol. But I do want to say, if you have to die young, dying of a heart attack in bed with Marlene and Dietrich is not a bad way to go. I would take that.
Yeah.
I'd take that.
Well, I have a great scrapbook from this woman, and it's probably one of the greatest scrapbooks. And it basically, she put everything from a few movies to all the newspaper clippings of the day when he died, like when the fire department came in. Now we hear a story that Marlena left out the back door or whatever, but then there's stories that they were kind of apart for a while because apparently Garbo had came to visit him, and she was a little jealous or whatever, and she went out the back door. And he had a nurse that was living there at the time, and there's pictures of her. And basically, he was up all night, and then by 5 in the morning, he said, "Oh gosh, I'm very tired." And so he went to go lay down, and he apparently had this heart attack in his bed. And then the fire department came, and there's stories that she was there, and that she just basically called the fire department, and her manager said, "Get out." Because this is not going to be good for you. She was a married woman, by the way. We all know that. So she had many lovers, but there was this moral clause during those days. So you couldn't really be like, "Oh, you're married, but yeah, you're having all." So those are the ones that really kind of blows me away. It's like, I don't know, was she there? Was she not? I want to say she was there. I hate to say that he died alone, and that's where Leatrice tries to set the record straight about her father, that he died alone, a recluse. And he had many friends that adored him and would come and visit him, and he had John Barrymore down the road, that would come and check on him all the time. He
was beloved.
Yeah, he was definitely beloved. And like I said, yes, he was bipolar. One minute he was just full of life and happiness, but when he was down, it was very dark. It was a really
huge extremes.
Yeah. So But
one of the things that I find so fascinating about John Gilbert, and I think why he, ends up is in so many different films, parts of him end up in all of these different characters, is because I don't know that we ever are going to know the truth. Like, there's all these stories out there. Was Dietrich there when he died? Wasn't she? When did he actually get into a fist fight with Louis B. Mayer, and about what? Because I personally, I believe Louis B. Mayer taking a swing at him in the offices 100%. I personally think that the story about the wedding and the bathroom and all of that, I think that it has perhaps been exaggerated. I think that there's a kernel of truth. I think that there was a blow up between the two of them.
Yeah.
But I find it, as somebody who works in Hollywood, did you see I find it hard to buy that he could take a swing at Louis B. Mayer at a party and only one person would have known about it. Like I think
they all knew about it. And did you see the interview with Eleanor Boardman? Did you ever have a chance to see that?
No.
I think if you watch that video,
but I feel that so many other people would have been talking about it. But I do think they clashed. I think that's true.
Yeah.
And they probably shouted at each other.
Here's the thing you always have to remember is a lot of these stars were very self-mythologizing. Like Louise Brooks once said, from the beginning, the truth was not in them. So I think and I'm not saying this Eleanor Boardman was lying or making this up, but some of these stars, they did not let the truth interfere with a good story. Right. And so it's like that game of telephone. Did you ever play that as a kid where I would tell the kid next to me a word, and by the time that word gets around the room, it's like a totally different word. So I don't know. I wasn't there, and it's hard to know the truth, but they didn't like each other. And Leatrice indicated too that they've had very different politics, very different personalities. They just were kind of like an oil and water situation. Like they just were not going to get along regardless.
I never knew I don't know what John Gilbert, what his political preference was, but I'm assuming that he might have been a liberal.
Yeah, I think so.
But we all know that the mayor was a Republican because he was always out with Herbert Hoover getting him elected. And that's why Thalberg was so upset at him, because I'm here, I'm trying to run a studio and you're off in Washington. But in the end, it did help Mayor in the end to save MGM from being taken over by, became an antitrust law. He went to go just talk to my attorney general or whatever. And the fact that he was this patriot and changed his birthday to 4th of July. And he loved the American dream. He was proud to be an American. So yeah, I guess Mayor was a very patriotic guy. He was a Republican, but I don't know if politics had a play in it. I also want to say that in the beginning, Mayor and Gilbert were kind of cool with each other. They didn't have any problems in the beginning because there's pictures of them together in New York, and they're standing next to each other. We got a lot of great things going to be happening, but I do believe it was when he divorced Leatrice, he wasn't happy about that because he goes, listen, you're going to be a big star. And the fact that you're getting divorced is it's not good. And then there was this whole thing that he discovered Garbo and brings her to America. This was his discovery. And all of a sudden now, Gilbert's rendezvous, he's living with him now and all this. So he wasn't happy about that. And we all know that he wasn't happy with Clark Gable and Joan Crawford when they were together. They weren't allowed to get married and they wanted to. So he didn't want, and that's why I think Clark Gable was successful, because he just kind of used Gilbert as a template to not make the same mistake that he did. And but I believe in the beginning they were okay with each other because they were really high on him, and Thalberg signed him up and they had plans for him. But it was just there was something about him that Mayor just did not like. And when you wrong him, he holds grudges.
He was vindictive.
Very,
Oh, absolutely vindictive. Yeah.
People and relationships in general can be very, very complicated.
Yeah, I'll say.
And very nuanced and very, very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it is. We got some questions coming in. Danny Miller says that he's absolutely going to try this. Other people are saying I need to freeze frame Carrie's initial reaction. Is this a new rival for Norma's dreaded oatmeal sticks?
No, I had the oatmeal sticks. This is much better. If
you like seafood and caviar, you might actually really like this. Maybe it's just a me thing, my palate.
I think it's just that you have to start with caviar or a caviar stand-in that's good on its own. And that was the mistake we made the first time.
Yes. Because Mary and I have been wanting to do this episode for like 3 years. I mean, this is not so.
This was one of the first things we talked about during the pandemic when
this was like
we were in each other's bubble.
During lockdown, we were in each other's pandemic bubble and we were talking about this. So this is how long it took for this one to happen.
Wow.
Leslie Apple, I think he would have evolved into a fine character actor had he not gone into directing. I believe that.
I agree. I completely agree. And I think that the later work that he was doing was moving in that direction. I cannot remember what was the name of the film where he played the murderous
downstairs.
Yes.
Evil butler, the driver, and he's
chauffeur. Yes.
Well, this is the thing. John Gilbert hated this whole lover role thing. Yeah. He loved his idea. He loved playing those unsympathetic roles. He liked to be that. I think he plays it in the movie. What's the one that's lost? Not but the not Four Walls. There's another film.
Tower Flies.
Tower.
It's the lost one.
But anyways, nevertheless, he was really good in playing these kind of roles, and that's what he liked. And you would have saw more of that, I think, in his career. There's a lot of films that I saw like in the late 30s and 40s that certain characters were playing, and I go, God, that's such a Gilbert role. So I see them roles that he probably would have played that they were played by other actors.
Krista Lawler, our friend Krista, hello. She says, no lie, I think Gilbert knew how to make light of himself too. When I see videos from Hearst Castle with him and Irving Thalberg, it cracks me up whenever I watch it. And this is true. If you go on YouTube, and I'll post about it, they were having fun up there at Hearst Castle.
Well,
They
I
were
made that
goofing off.
video, by the way.
Oh, you did? Oh, Krista posted
Yeah,
her video.
so there's a
Okay,
video.
okay.
I made that video and I got that from the John Gilbert Appreciation Society. It's on a VHS. And because if you know the bottom, it
Okay.
has the thing rolling, the numbers or whatever. So that's from a
Time code.
yeah. So that's on a VHS machine. And I added the music to that. And it just turned out good. And normally YouTube will take away that music for copyright infringements, I guess. But they kept it. And there's another one, Everybody's Coming to the Hearst Castle, and it's Bocelli music. That's mine. So if it says His Hour 1924
Okay.
on YouTube, you can look me up. Those are, and I haven't posted in a long time, but I'm going to start putting more good stuff. But yeah, I put that together, and you see that. I was at a Hearst Castle tour some years ago, and they take you into that theater and they start showing all the actors. And then they showed, I'm John Gilbert, right? It was so funny, but it was just like, yeah, you see how happy he was, and
Yeah.
you know. But yeah, if you look at YouTube, His Hour 1924. There's another one with where there's this shoe fetish with Marion Davies and one of the directors.
Eric von Stroheim, he was the king of the shoe fetish.
Yeah, and but there was another one, Edmund Goulding, I think,
Okay.
and they're at the Hearst Castle, and they're right next to the statue or whatever, and they're doing this foot thing with the shoe. So if you look that up, it's on there. So there's about 3 or 4 Hearst Castle videos.
Okay.
Those are just timeless. I love those videos.
Excellent.
To add music to it, that was a lot of fun.
We've got some people saying they're going to start following your YouTube channel. So awesome. Also, tell me something else. We've got some memorabilia here, and I'm seeing this. By the way, this is my photo of John Gilbert in a beautiful wooden frame here that we've had on the table the whole time.
And mine is, alas, in Los Angeles, where I am not. But so this has to do.
I got Mary a photo of John Gilbert one year for her birthday, and then I got it really early in advance, and I kept looking at it going, man, I might just keep this and give her something else. But then I'm like, no, I got it for her. I got to give it to her. But yeah.
It was funny because it was on my wall for the longest time. I finally moved it out of rotation, and we'll put it back up eventually. But I had it up, and I'm so sorry. I have to take this. Continue with what you're saying, and I'll tell the story in just a moment.
Okay. So Charles, while Mary steps off, let's look at some memorabilia that you brought over to Chateau Bible to show you to us today.
Okay, well, first of all, this is a porcelain
You want to show it to the
elephant right here. And
take it to the
this
camera?
was donated to me by the family of John Gilbert from Lauren Hart. And this belonged to Leatrice Joy, her grandmother. It was a present. Yes, the tusk on the other side broke, but gives it its character to it. And so at any rate, this porcelain elephant, there's a story behind it. And Gilbert was very good friends with B.B. Daniels, and he bought her one. And so she found the receipt, and she says, "What's this?" And when Gilbert would get caught, he would just fess up or whatever like that. And so she demanded him to buy her one. And so that's what he did. He bought her this, and it has a little thing right here, a little candle, and you have to put the kerosene under it. So there you go. It's like this little lit thing right here. And so I found that very fascinating, and it's from the 20s or whatever, I don't want to burn your house down. Right here is a dagger that I have. And this is also from the family. It's a Russian, actually I looked it up by taking photos of it, and it's a Navy dagger, Russian Cossack dagger. And I believe that this dagger was given to Gilbert during the making of the Cossacks. So this one is a very old antique.
Show it to the camera.
Yeah.
Lots of beautiful ornate detail on this thing.
Yeah, as you can see, it's fallen apart, but as we all know, he played a Russian Cossack, and he was marvelous in that with Reine, as we know, in 1928. So it comes up in that phone, and there's the dagger. So, anyways, there's that.
So it's got like 3 pieces.
Yeah, it just falls apart. It's just That's how you know it's very old. It's antique.
Is that wood or leather inside that thing?
Huh?
There's like,
It seemed like there's leather
it's like
inside.
crumbling leather. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And so I was given the opportunity and very honored to be able to share this. This was in the exhibit at the Hollywood Heritage Museum, marking the 100-year anniversary of MGM. Now, this is a book by Bartley's the Magnificent. The dust jacket is from the 1926 version. I took it off my other one and put it on this older Bartley's book. And it was a book that was published, I believe, in 1924, and he was still in his last year with Leatrice. But as you can see, he wrote in it to Leatrice. It was dedicated, and this is before he even did Bartley's. So it's as if he knew he was going to do that movie already. And I can read it to you because
Yeah, read it to us here.
yeah, and that's Bartley's. So I was honored to be able to showcase that. And it says, "For my precious, with all the love in my heart, may this romance bring a gentle breath of that beauty which makes up our own, your husband." And he doesn't even say John Gilbert, but it's, I got it from them. And I mean, there's pictures and there's all kinds of things in here.
Oh, wow. There's cards, letters.
Yeah, this is Leatrice stuff. And
Wow.
so yeah, this is from the library. I also have another book, but I didn't bring it, and it was a book given to him by Adela Rogers St. John, and it was about her father, Earl Rogers. It was in 1934, and her father, we all know, was big time defense attorney whose character was created for Perry Mason stories. And so she gave him a book, said, read it. And so he read the book, and then he signed it, because when he would give a book away, he would give it to his attorney or his doctor or whatever, and they were able to obtain that. So anything that has, if you could find a book that John Gilbert actually touched or read or whatever, it's just, there's something about it. And and I also have one of my
Okay.
one of my favorite, I'm a big collector, and I started collecting about 20 years ago. And the more you collect, it just becomes like, a bad habit, but it could be a good habit. I think the more you collect, it's like you get closer to the actor, finding photographs that are rare behind the scenes or them at home. But this particular one was photographed by Ruth Harriet Louise at his home.
The only female studio photographer during
Yeah.
Hollywood's golden age on staff.
He is at his house on Tower Road, and he's sitting in front of his marvelous desk that he had shipped in from England. And it has the top comes down on it. And
Roll top.
It's a roll, not a roll top.
Oh, not a roll top.
It's a secretarian where it just kind of goes down. So this he had shipped in from England, and it was at Tower Road. And when he passed away, Virginia Bruce got the bulk of his estate, even though Marlene Dietrich claimed that there was another will.
She was very mad about that, right?
Yeah.
She bought his sheets at auction.
Yes, she went. Well, who had her sheets too was Virginia Bruce. They had a big auction, and poor Leatrice Jr., the daughter, was. I have pictures that I've given to the family where she's at the auction, and she just has this stern face. You see a lot of photos of her when she was young. Very rare you see her smiling. You can see she was so upset about things, what happened to her father, but she actually, got on the auction, bid it on a little box, a treasure box. She got Jack's mother's makeup kit, whatever. But that doesn't take away what she really deserved to get. She got a measly $10,000, but in those days that was probably $100,000. But she got $10,000. Adela Rogers St. John's son, Dick Hyland Jr., got $100,000. And Virginia Bruce, and keep in mind, I think a lot of it had to do with her father. He's the one that kind of handled the business. He basically says, first of all, my daughter's a virgin, and I think Gilbert at that time just knew he was his times were numbered soon. And I feel like as if it's like, you know what, she's gonna have it all, whatever, at that time. But as far as a second will, we will never know, because I know that she tried to contest it, and there was no success. But they had this big auction, and it was in the newspaper. People came, they bought whatever, but Virginia kept the desk, and she had it in storage. And when Susan moved up to Portland, Oregon, to have a new life up there, when her mother passed away, she had to come down and grab things out of the storage, and the desk was one of them. And she kept everything nice and tidy and neat and had things in storage. And when she passed away in 2004, 2005, her Susan Ann's son ended up getting the desk, and a lot of memorabilia stuff, a lot of photos. I have tons of Virginia Bruce photos that I was able to obtain from the Virginia Bruce estate. And the desk is something that I've been having my eye on for a long time. David passed away, and so his daughter now has it and they live in Portland. So the desk is the holy grail. And if I do get it, I hope to do a showcase with my big John Gilbert exhibit, with the desk, and there's a lot of things happening, I'm working on a book to do a coffee table book with my collection. I've interviewed a bunch of people, so I'm trying to put together a documentary. I'm hoping that maybe Stephen Smith might get involved with this. He's a documentary guy, really big, because it needs to be done right. And I've also have written. Now, I've been on this for a long time, and I do have a script. And so it might be rewritten, because there's so much more that I learn every day about John Gilbert. So it's just a matter of how I'm going about it. I'm not going to go through a basic beginning and, story, script. It's going to be, mixed in a certain angle, and it's going to be beautiful. But things like this, when it's a passion project, it takes time, And my film school has been in the studio business for 20 years. I'm more like a set decorator. I've worked behind the scenes. I'm on set a lot. They like to put me on set, and I'm working around directors and whatnot. So there's not a day that goes by that I want to tell the story in a larger format, and it's going to happen. And so, and if not me, someone will eventually. But right now, I definitely I'm pretty hard strung on it, and to keep this thing going. But as long as, like I said, as long as I'm alive, it will flow. And thanks to Leatrice Gilbert Fountain, if it wasn't for her putting her father back on the map, and I know that she's looking down and very proud, and that she has given me this knowledge of what she taught me, so I'm very excited to be here. The exhibit was kind of my first time coming out. I've been low pro, and now I want to really share my story.
Yeah, because when the exhibit, I'm friends with Angie and Darren, and when the exhibit was being mounted, I went down to visit them, and I was like, wait a minute, this guy, how did I not know about this? Because I keep tabs on things. So the fact that I didn't know who you were, what you're, it was kind of like, wait a minute, I gotta talk to this guy. So
you were very excited. I remember, because you were like, there's a guy who has Gilbert collection. He's a Gilbert collection.
no. I was like, Mary, you've got to meet this guy. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm friends with Roy, and who's the Hedy Lamarr guy, and his story is incredible. And he's a dealer, so I used to collect from him and buy when he had his store in Hollywood, and so I would get stuff through him, and I love his stories. And then I'm friends with Daryl Rooney, and
he's been on Hollywood Kitchen many times.
I've been to his house. He took me to Sarah Collins. I better say it right.
Of course, Sue Collins.
Sue Collins. I went to her house, and we talked about Garbo and John Gilbert, and it was just such a treat to sit, and she made drinks, cocktails. We had cocktails together. And I've been to Daryl's. I've been to many of his book readings. He's signed books for me, and he's just a total treasure for Jean Harlow, as well as knowing Mr. Barnes, and
yes.
And for the Norma Shear. So when I heard about that there was this exhibit, I got in touch with Darren, and I heard he was co-curating it. And it's a no-brainer. You're in, In fact, actually, I had two cabinets and they took one away from me. I go, just like Gilbert, they put a movie in front of him and they take it away. I go, no, I'm very grateful. No, I had 2 cabinets, but because that's only a fraction of what I own. And
well, there's always room for more in the future.
yeah,
So.
yeah. No, I was, like I said, I was very grateful. And what was great about that event was that there was many events. And so I would meet people from all over the United States, not just locals in our little circle, but people that wanted to know, like, wow, what was it really true about his voice? And then I would just tell them the story. And it's just, I'm glad I was able to touch a lot of people that came to Hollywood and to find, oh, I remember that guy. I heard about him, so getting the message out, I think this is what it's all about. I'm just basically that guy now who was chosen. Why me? I don't know. I'm your average guy, I'm an ex baseball jock. I love surfing. I'm not, and for me, all of a sudden I'm into this. I think as if he channeled through me or he chose me or whatever. I don't tell many people that because I think I'm crazy, but
Oh no, we don't think you're crazy. Do you want to tell the story about the forest lawn?
You tell the Forest Lawn story, but it's a really good one. We both like 2 minutes walk from Forest Lawn.
Yeah.
Tell the story.
Yeah, well, we can see it actually. So I live for those who don't know, I live upstairs from Carrie. So we can see it from our apartment, from the windows of from the back windows of our apartments. So John Gilbert is buried just up the hill from where we live. And we went over one day trying to find his grave. And it was the hardest grave that we have ever found. It was like the directions were bad. It was on the side of the hill. It was overgrown. And but we're just traipsing around Forest Lawn, shouting, John Gilbert, where are you?
Yeah, it was like 95 degrees that day. I think I fell and slid down part of the hill.
We did, yeah. And we finally gave up and came back another day. But it was like we were laughing the whole time because we were like, oh, he's probably just looking down at us going like, oh my God, these girls. Like,
you don't have anything better to do. I mean, it's kind of sad. It's flattering, but it's sad. And I kind of have a theory that people and things find you. Absolutely. Instead of my whole life is that, really. Yeah. So I feel kind of like sometimes it just finds you. Gilbert found you. And Darren always says something that I think is very important is that a lot of stars need an advocate because there are some stars out there that there's nobody around that's really talking about them, collecting on them, making a big fuss over them. And I think when that happens, there's people that slip through the cracks, their lives, their careers, their artistry kind of gets a little lost in the shuffle. So someone like Gilbert, he needs an advocate and you're that person. So thank you. And
I feel great to be here. Thank you. And just to let people know, if you do want to see John Gilbert's grave, it's in Whispering Pines, it's called. And as you go up, you have to count 5 trees. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th tree, go up the hill. And I did all that. And I couldn't find him. I was like, oh my God, where's he at? And it just popped. It was like, whoa, it was like, he was right there. And everybody's all lined up, but his is off to the right and there's no stones around him. And it's just this beautiful, simple signature. And I found him and I was really excited. And that's when I started really connecting. And you definitely you feel his spirit. And definitely when you go up to Tower Road, even though the house is not there, his spirit is running amok because that's where he died. So his spirit is up on the hill. His spirit is everywhere, wherever you want it to be.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully where you're going to discover him is in his films, tune in to that TCM day. When is it again, Carrie?
August 19th for 24 hours. They are showing John Gilbert films for the Summer Under the Stars marathons. So go to tcm.com and you can find the schedule there. And I'll post it on my page too. Rose de Guzman is asking, if someone wanted to watch a John Gilbert film for the first time, what film would you recommend?
Ooh.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about here, spreading the word. I love it.
Well, I would start with Silent because that's where he really resonates from. He just comes to life. And I'd say maybe The Merry Widow because, it's a beautiful film. got Mae Murray in it, Eric von Stroheim. There's a lot of history behind it, and his eyes are dark and they're piercing, and he's incredible. And then, of course, there's 3 films in silent I would watch. I'd watch that one, and I would watch the Big Parade, which was the movie that catapulted him to stardom, and then the other one right after it, La Boheme, which is pantomime at its best. And then in the 4th film I would go, it would have to be a sound film, and I think watch Downstairs. It's a great film because it really defined his voice, and when he finally got it together, I think he finally was able to figure out that medium.
And Rose is saying she doesn't have TCM. I understand a lot of people don't. Frankly, it's the only reason I pay out the nose for cable, because otherwise I don't use it. But there are things on DVD. Bardley's is on DVD from our friends at flickeralley.com.
Mm.
Big Parade is on DVD. Also, the Warner Archive has got Merry Widow. They've got a lot of Gilbert titles, actually. And I have a post about that.
Yeah, you can get them on Amazon. You can even go to eBay and just type it up. They have DVDs made up, and you'd be surprised.
Stuff with Garbo. The stuff with Garbo is easy to find on DVD. I'm not sure about Love, but I can't remember if Love is out there.
Love and, Flesh and the Devil.
Christina, definitely Flesh and the Devil. And actually that's where I no slight to La Boheme, but I would substitute in my list for people. I would say Flesh and the Devil.
There's no doubt. I forgot to mention, because that really was the beginning for them in that film. They just they come to life, and you see how passionate that they were with each other, and they were beautiful,
Yeah.
So
Well, and Love too, also, which tends to get overlooked, but is in its own right a really wonderful film, and they're both fantastic in it.
Yeah.
I think he partially directed it too. I heard that Garbo insisted he directed all the love scenes in that.
He basically, that's why she really adored him, because she didn't like him just because he was just beautiful. He was an artist, just like, he had Marlene Dietrich, because he was an artist, and he took they knew he was the real deal. But lastly, I would recommend another sound film, and with Gilbert and Garbo, would be Queen Christina.
Oh, that's great. Yes.
Yeah, because you really, really hear his voice, and sound had gotten better at that time. They got it down, and his voice was fine. And there's a lot of story about how Laurence Olivier was supposed to play that role, and she demanded. And this was a film that, by this time, she was the biggest star in Hollywood, and she was basically trying to revive him again. But by this time, it was a little too late, and the studio wasn't going to take the chance of John Gilbert to haunt them, according to Leah Joy. But it's a wonderful film, and it's the last film that they did together, and I think he's just wonderful, and that's when you really see that his voice was fine, and definitely.
Well, guys, I think that's about it for this episode, but I'm so glad this has finally happened. This has been years in the making of As Mary Can Tell You. And the thrill I get about doing these episodes is just meeting people like Charles, having conversations with you, and hopefully helping people discover these stars and helping their work live on. So, to John Gilbert, thank you so much, guys. And please stay tuned for more food, fun, and film history from Hollywood Kitchen.
Thank you.
Cheers.